Thank you, Jill. I want to start by, yes, we have a lot of stuff happening. The Life Builders table, please check that out. We also have a fundraiser, so our Lighthouse Kids Ministry is doing some fun things, dressing up in different, today's Jersey Day, and then in concert with that, our senior high youth group students, that's SHIG, they are doing some fundraising while that's happening. So today they're selling Cracker Jacks and peanuts, and there's a ring toss that you can buy, and you can win the Coke bottle that you get the ring around, and we got some Cubs tickets that we're raffling off as well. So, Shig, there they are. They're going to be serving all of your fun needs. Make a donation, support them. Please do. We would really appreciate that for their mission trips that are happening next month. We are going to be looking at, as Jill mentioned, the psalm from the Old Testament, Psalm 122, but I want to begin with a newer story, one that many of you know plenty about. It's a story about a boy who was raised by a man who was not his flesh and blood father, whose birth had been foretold by prophecy. This young man grew in wisdom and strength and began to learn about who he was and who his father had made him to be, and most importantly, a mission to save his people. He gathered around him a group of friends who were there to help him live out that mission. He faced temptations. He was promised by a dark figure that he could have great power, but ultimately he overcame that tempter and defeated him. We're talking, of course, about Luke Skywalker. May the 4th be with you. To those that celebrate, today is a special day. It is Star Wars Day. If you don't know what I'm talking about, there were some movies that came out called Star Wars, and then May the 4th is this thing at Star Wars Day, and everybody and their mom talks about it. So I don't get to preach on May the 4th very often, so this was my chance, you guys, to celebrate. So enough silliness, putting that behind us. We are, in fact, going to open our Bibles up to Psalm 122. As you do that, I want to ask a question. Why do you go to church? There's often more than one answer to that question of why you go to church. Some of you might go because a family member wants you to go. Some of you might go primarily because you really like the music. Some go that you really like the message. Some are really there for the community, the people that you see there. I actually don't think there must be just one reason, but I do think there's one right answer that needs to show up in the list. We'll come back to that later. So, the Psalms of Ascent, what are they? Well, put succinctly, they are a group of psalms related to pilgrimages that followers of Yahweh would have made, potentially 3 times a year, to a festival or a feast taking place in Jerusalem. If you're wondering where Jerusalem is, I've got a map for you. So this spot here on the map is where Jerusalem is. It's that red dot there, and you'll see that the Sea of Galilee is the little blue at the top, and the Jordan River flows down into the Dead Sea. That's the Mediterranean Sea to the west. So that's where we are talking about, the place that people would have gone. And just in case you're curious, the 3 feasts that they would be going up for the Feast of Unleavened Bread, which includes Passover, the Feast of Weeks, which is also known as Pentecost, and then the Feast of Tabernacles. And these would take place at the temple that was built by King Solomon, completed in around 957 BC. And that was where Yahweh dwelt, in the temple. That was where you could go and meet the actual presence of God. Now, that temple was then destroyed about 400 years later by the Babylonians. It was rebuilt by the Jews after the exile, and then destroyed again by the Romans in 70 AD. Now, pilgrimage is not something we're used to these days, but it's a purposeful journey to a place of meaning. We talk about it, sort of half jokingly, like if you're a golf lover, you have to make at some point your pilgrimage to Augusta, or if you're a baseball fan, you got to make your pilgrimage to Wrigley, or it's Fenway. There's places where we talk about making the pilgrimage, but this was a real thing where it's like, this is what we do. If you are the people of God and you lived nearby, you would make this journey as a pilgrim and meet with God in worship. And that's really what this journey is about, the hope filled inside of a desire to meet with God and worship. And we're going to walk through this psalm rather quickly. I've got 3 takeaways at the end before we turn our attention to the communion table. If you're new, first Sunday of the month here at Christ Church, we celebrate communion together. So this psalm is divided into 2 sections, verses 1 through 5, and then 6 through 9. Let's take a look at the first verse here. I rejoiced with those who said to me, let us go to the house of the Lord. You sense this excitement as they're getting ready for this journey. Do you have a place in your life that's special to you like that? I do. I have a camp that I started going to when I was 7 years old in Central Texas. I went there every summer of my childhood into college, and then they opened a family camp later, and so then I started taking my family to the family camp, then my kids started working there, and I actually get to go there, continue to go. I help with the music there. So this summer, I'll be going there, and there's just this excitement as the date is approaching. You're driving from either Austin or San Antonio, wherever you are, and you head into the hill country, and the terrain changes, and you're getting excited about where you're going. And then you finally see your cell phone stops working. You see the camp there in the distance, the gate. You turn in to the gate. There's a gravel road that you're driving. It goes long, winding gravel road, heads down to the Frio River, which is right there on the property. And the sign says, yes, you drive in the river. And so this dammed up river, we actually drive in it, and we roll the windows down at that point and just smell this unmistakable camp smell. There's just this incredible excitement about, we're here, we're back at camp, and this is so fun. Maybe you have a place like that. Maybe it's camp. Maybe it's another place where you go every summer and you're just so excited to be there. That is the excitement that they're feeling when they're saying, I rejoice with those who said to me, let's go to the house of the Lord. But it's even better because these people are going to where God lives. It's not just a fun place, not just warm memories, but this is where God lives. Verse 2, our feet are standing in your gates, Jerusalem. Jerusalem is built like a city that is closely compacted together. This is referring to the fact that Jerusalem is well built. They're proud of how this city is built. They're proud that their city is well fortified against anybody who would try to attack it. Verse 4, that is where the tribes go up, the tribes of the Lord, to praise the name of the Lord according to the statute given to Israel. There stand the thrones for judgment, the thrones of the house of David. So these tribes referenced here, it's a reference to the fact that Israel divided into 12 tribes, and according to the 12 sons of Jacob. And if you were a part of Israel, you were one of those tribes. And so you would take pride in what tribe you were in the same way that we might root for one sports team. And in fact, for them, there are these tribes, but when you get to the temple, there are no tribes anymore. We're all together. In the same way, if you're maybe a basketball fan and you root for the Bulls and your friend roots for the Bucks, or maybe you're a Lakers fan, gross, nobody wants, that's like, I get it, but whatever. But, so you're like, boo, I don't like you, whatever. Every 4 years, Team USA, the guy that you were rooting against, all of a sudden you're rooting for him. We're unified. We're Team USA. We're together. It's that same sense of unity as they approach the temple that doesn't matter what tribe you're in, we're here together as the people of God. And then there's this turn in verse 6 that goes from the anticipation of reaching it to a prayer. Pray for the peace of Jerusalem, it says in verse 6. May those who love you be secure. May there be peace within your walls and security within your citadels. So there's a little play on words because Jerusalem has in it, the second half, the Salem part is the same root of the word shalom, meaning peace. So pray for the peace. There's the sort of play on the fact that Jerusalem itself means place of peace. And they're encouraging people to pray for peace, which I think it's noteworthy, too, that this hope for peace continues. And really, for the last 3,000 years, there hasn't been peace in Jerusalem. We can still pray for peace in Jerusalem. And then verse 8, for the sake of my family and friends, I will say, peace be within you. For the sake of the house of the Lord our God, I will seek your prosperity. So again, a blessing on those who are on their way to this glorious city. So when you take a step back from the psalm, we're going to ask some questions and make some observations about what's going on here. I've got 3 implications before we come to the communion table. The first one is this: the God of the Bible interacts with history. The God of the Bible interacts with history. Now, I've got a picture here of modern-day Jerusalem. It was a picture taken by an intern of ours who was there recently, and the sort of the square part is called the Temple Mount. That is where the temple would have stood. Again, the temple has been destroyed. The Golden Dome there was built, it's a Muslim place, a holy place for Muslims. None of that would have been there when we're talking about. But that place is the place where the temple dwelled. You have to understand there was a point in history where the presence of God literally resided right there. God lived within walking distance of his people. And people, you could say, we're going to meet with God, and not symbolically, but because God literally dwelt there. Unlike the gods of other religions, our God is a God who interacts in history. We see this displayed throughout the Old Testament, but I was reminded, just one example, the famous story in 1 Kings 18 where Elijah takes on the prophets of Baal. And it's just sort of this like grudge match against one another where they're like, yeah, we'll see what your God can do. And they go first, and they're saying, they've got these 2 offerings, and we'll see if one of the gods will burn them up. And they cry out over and over, please, burn up this offering. And Elijah's like trash-talking them. He's like, oh, are they sleeping? Are they having a nappy poo, your gods? I mean, he's so bold because it's not happening. Their gods are not doing a thing. And then when it's time for him, he's like, all right, you watch this? Okay, pour water onto my offering. Pour water again. Pour water again. And then he prays, and God burns up the offering. It says it even licks up all the water. Because our God is a God who interacts with his people. That happened, a long time ago, and it happens today. I've got one example from last night that I found remarkable. I was preaching at the Saturday night service. There was a woman there who I had been encouraging. She's a long-time part of Christ Church, but never been in a small group. By the way, I'm the small groups pastor. And if you want to get into a small group, talk to me. If you don't want to get into a small group, don't make eye contact with me for too long, because I will lure you in. I will just be careful, all right? So she wasn't careful last night. I went up to her, hey, I was talking about being in a small group, and she's like, I'm sorry I didn't email you back, but I don't know if this small group that you have, are they going to want me in, if they've been established? And I said, no, they're relatively new. I just need you to make a connection with someone in the group. Literally, as I say this, a woman walks by me in the group, and I did a double take. I was like, wait, come here. I'm inviting her to your group. You guys need to meet. And she's like, oh yeah, I'd love to meet you. Yeah, you should definitely come. And she's like, I'd never come to the Saturday night service. So it was just like, so this poor woman is now like, she has to go to this group. She's like, fine, okay, God wants me to go to this group. It was incredible and very small thing. But I just found it like, God, what an amazing thing that you did right here in our midst, because our God is a God who interacts with history. He's not far off and distant. He interacts with his people, which brings us to our next point, which is that the gathered church functions like the temple today. While Psalm 122 doesn't quote unquote apply to us because going on pilgrimage a few times a year is no longer necessary, there is a sense in which the temple in Jerusalem, which was in one place at one time, has now spread to the local expression of that in cities literally throughout the world. You may remember that when Jesus died on the cross, the curtain of the second temple was torn in two, and symbolically, the physical presence of God that was limited to the temple was now free by the Spirit to be with God's people wherever they went. So this local church is, in fact, the modern-day expression of God's temple. And it appears as though, even in the ancient Near East, even during biblical, the New Testament times, recorded in the book of Hebrews, this became less of a priority of gathering together. The famous passage from Hebrews chapter 10, 24 and 25. The author of Hebrews says, "Let us consider how we may spur one another on toward love and good deeds, not giving up meeting together, as some are in the habit of doing, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching." Even then, people were saying, I'm not sure why we need to keep getting together. And the author of Hebrews is saying, no, we need each other. We can't stop just because we have the Spirit of God, just because we know about Jesus. We need each other. We need to be encouraged. We need to spur one another on. And we can take for granted what a gift it is for us to gather together in a couple of ways. One, you think about there are, right at this moment, throughout the world, places, countries where it is illegal to gather in a Christian church, where you would be put in jail simply for showing up to worship God in that setting. That is happening right now. What freedoms we enjoy that we can come here without any worry of that. But secondly, I think about what happened 5 years ago when everything shut down. We weren't able to gather together. And I remember, of course, we worked very hard to try to create great online experiences and music and all of that. But we learned pretty quickly that it wasn't the same. And I remember the first time we had a service, it was on an afternoon, I believe, or an evening, and we gathered here on the lawn, and we worshiped together. And I just remember being very emotional, surprisingly, sort of surprised by how much I was like, I missed this. What a joy it is to be gathered together again as the people of God. And I will say this too, I'm so grateful that we have this stream. Of course, we've continued going with the online service, and those of you out there, we're so glad you're joining us here. It's great when you're traveling, when you're sick, and you want to be able to connect. Maybe you want to check out a service before you show up in person. That's great. But there is something better than an online service. In fact, I'll say there's nothing better than being in person with God's people. So, God interacts with us in history. That's number one. Number two, the gathered church functions like the temple today. And then my final point is this. It's okay to come to church for many reasons, but there must be one in the list. If you're a follower of Christ, it's okay for there to be a number of reasons. If you're not a follower of Christ, come to church anytime you want. We love having you here. If you're checking things out, if you're just exploring, absolutely come for whatever reason. We want to have you here. But if you are a follower of Christ, there has to be at least one of those reasons has to be that you are coming here to worship God. That has to be in the list. Worshiping God has to be a priority. Pastor Eugene Peterson said this about this passage in relation to his job as a pastor. He said, "I go about my work in hopes to create in each person a desire to worship." I find that quote inspiring and also convicting because it seems obvious, right? Well, yeah, of course, your job as a pastor, you should want for people to grow in their desire to worship. But things get complicated, and church becomes about so many other things. And well, this person says this, and this, well, we didn't think about this, and pastors can become like professional Christians, where we just sort of, okay, I'm here. I gotta make sure this thing keeps humming. Sunday comes every week, and we gotta keep the machine rolling. And it's easy, even for pastors, to remember that we're here for God. That's why we're here. I went to church my entire childhood, basically every Sunday of my childhood, and it had nothing to do with God, because it was just because that's what I did. My parents woke me up. My mom put me in uncomfortable clothes. For whatever reason, she insisted that I wear a belt. Like, that was so important. Well, get in the car. Where's your belt? My pants are not falling down. So get your belt on. Like, God needs me to wear a belt at church? I don't get this. For the record, I am wearing, Mom, if you're watching, get the belt on. But, it was okay, and I enjoyed the people there, and sometimes I learned a thing or two, I'm sure. But it wasn't about God. And it was at the end of my time in high school that my faith started to grow. And really, for me, the contemporary worship movement, which was really growing in kind of the early 90s and throughout the 90s, that changed everything for me. As I discovered that, I can go into church, and as we sing songs of praise to God, God is in our midst. And we are interacting with God here. This is not just something I'm doing to check off my list before I go to lunch later with my friends. There's something incredible and wonderful and holy happening here as we, the people of God, come to worship God. So this psalm should be a reminder that gathering together is primarily to be about that. And it can become challenging for us, especially if we've been in the church a long time, and I have a lot of opinions, and I know a lot of you have a lot of opinions, and that song, I can't stand that song. Why do they keep doing that song? It's too bright in there. It's too dark in there. It's too loud. It's too quiet. That guy, I can't believe this. This guy annoys me. Can't believe he's here. I can't see him. We all these things conspire against us as we come to church, and it makes it very difficult for us, in the words of Psalm 122, to rejoice with those who said, "Let us go to the house of the Lord." And you may have heard it said, and I agree as well, that worship is not just the music. Worship is so much more than that. It's more than just the songs that we sing. And yet, there is something really amazing about using, we sing a lot of us sing all the time. But for us to use this gift that we've been given of music and of singing to worship God, to use this gift of music to praise the one who gave us that gift and who gives us life. And there is something, I would say, quite peculiar about what we do here. Like if someone wanders in and they've never really understood this, and we're singing to God and giving Him glory, it doesn't make a lot of sense for many reasons, but largely it doesn't make sense because people outside, you're sort of taught to take care of yourself. It's like, look out for you. Don't worry about other things. Just make sure that you are taken care of. And what we learn here is that we are to give God glory. We are to give Him all that we have. And when we do, He provides for all of our needs. It doesn't make sense. It's again, I think it's peculiar, but we have been called to do that, to go against what the world says, which is to take care of yourself, put yourself first. And when we come and we say, God, you are the center of all things, we give you glory, that our priorities are put in their proper place when we do that. And, it doesn't matter how you do it. It doesn't matter if you're like one of these worshipers or this kind of worshiper, or your hands are here, or your hands are in your pockets, or you close your eyes, or you don't close your eyes. It doesn't matter how you do it. It just matters that you do it. And I would say, someone has asked me, like when I pray, if you're telling me to pray, how long should I pray for? And someone said very wisely, you should pray until you have prayed. And I say the same thing here. You should worship God until you have worshiped. Just doesn't matter whether it's a long time or a short time or whatever it is, but you should make sure that when you come into the house of God, that you're putting a priority on worshiping Him when you are here. I'm reminded of a famous story that turned into a famous worship song. It's a worship leader named Matt Redman. He's British, and he's written tons of incredible worship songs, 10,000 Reasons and Blessed Be Your Name. But there was a time about 30 years ago in his church when people in the area were finding out about what a great worship leader he was, and people were coming and showing up, and it was sort of this church was exploding, and all of a sudden, it became about what was happening on the stage. And it was, hey, well, that guy isn't really cutting it. We need to find somebody else to do that. And that song isn't great. And they were discovering that it was becoming about the music and about the songs and about kind of this experience where it was like the band had become the focus and the congregation was the audience. And someone sort of raised their hand and said, look, we need to reset here because we all are to be the congregation, even people in the band. God is the audience. We are here to praise him. And so one Sunday morning, they said, well, let's try something different. And so people showed up for a service, and there were no instruments on stage. And they didn't have any music. And they said, they banned the band for the day. And they said, we've sort of gotten away from what this is supposed to be about. It's actually not even about the music. It's about God. And so they waited in silence, and they would say, if somebody wants to offer a prayer, please do that. Or if somebody wants to sing a song a cappella, that's fine. We're just going to sort of see what God does. Which, I'll be honest, sounds just terribly awkward to me. But I wasn't there. I would have been like, oh, this is weird. Can you just play a worship song? But as they said it was absolutely revolutionary for their congregation because they realized that they were kind of missing it. And sometimes we need to do the same thing. Sometimes it can become about something else, and we need to remember it comes back to God. Matt Redman wrote a worship song about it. Some of you know it. It's called The Heart of Worship. And the lines go, when the music fades, all is stripped away, and I simply come, longing just to bring something that's of worth that will bless your heart. I'll bring you more than a song, for a song in itself is not what you've required. You search much deeper within. Through the way things appear, you're looking into my heart. And the chorus says, I'm coming back to the heart of worship, and it's all about you. And he says, I'm sorry, Lord, for the thing I made it when it's all about you. And there are times, as I said, in our own lives where we have to kind of repent of what we've made church about, what we've made our faith about. It becomes about us. It becomes about what God does or doesn't do for us. It's about what our friends at church do or don't do for us. It's about whether our kids are doing well or not, whether our loved ones are healthy or not. And listen, God cares about our lives. He cares about the details. He cares about music. He cares about the people that you love. But mostly he cares about whether we are his, whether our hearts are aligned with his, whether we bring all of ourselves into a worship setting. And honestly, the worship setting doesn't really matter. What instruments, whether it's hymns or choruses, or it just matters the connection with God, whether we are surrendering to God or not. That's why I like the lyrics and the heart behind this song, The Heart of Worship, because I think that is, I love this sentiment that it's the heart of worship. What is the heart of worship? The heart of worship is about God. He's the focus. And, I joked before about whether your hands are here or whatever, but I will say that there are times when, if you are having a difficult time connecting with God, maybe you're you're distracted or whatever it is, I have found that sometimes what I do with my body will help inform my spirit. So if I want to connect with God, then maybe I'll just put my hands out, because that's just sort of like, I want my spirit to reflect the fact that my hands are here in surrender to God. So that's something that you might just want to try sometime. If you've never done it, just as a way to connect. Often when you engage your body, often your spirit follows. So a surrendered heart is what we bring to God, which is the incredible message of grace. Just bring you. Bring your brokenness and your triumphs, your joy and your pain, and enjoy God. An analogy that I heard a pastor share one time, which I've never forgotten, and I'll close with this before we turn to the communion table. In the analogy, the pastor compared God to a mountain spring. something that is refreshing and beautiful and never runs dry. He said, God is not like a watering trough that needs to be filled. When we come to church, we don't bring something that God doesn't already have. And he said that some people think they need to bring their buckets of water as though God is a watering trough. But no, God is like a self-replenishing mountain stream. Here's what he says. He says, if you want to glorify the worth of a watering trough, you work hard to keep it full and useful. But if you want to glorify the worth of a spring, you do it by getting down on your hands and knees and drinking to your heart's satisfaction until you have the refreshment and strength to go back down in the valley and tell people what you've found. You do not glorify a mountain spring by dutifully hauling water up the path from the river below and dumping it in the spring. Likewise, the way to please God is to come to him to get and not to give, to drink and not to water. And then he says, my hope is a desperate sinner who lives in a Death Valley desert of unrighteousness, hangs on this biblical truth that God is the kind of God who will be pleased with the one thing I have to offer, my thirst. When we come to God in worship, we don't have to come to impress him. We don't have to say, oh, Lord, I love you so much. Look at how much I love you. The most important thing is not how much we love God. It's about how much he loves us. Come to him with your thirst and enjoy God. That will bring him joy and will bring you refreshment. And as we turn to the table, we have this incredible privilege. The people of Israel had a requirement, they had an obligation to go to a place to meet with God. There were physical sacrifices of animals required. It was thrilling, I'm sure, to visit the place where God lived, but if you lived far away or if you didn't have a lot of money, you couldn't necessarily afford to do that. Today, we live on this side of the cross. We have been given an invitation to come boldly into the presence of God, boldly before his throne of grace. How was this achieved? It was achieved through the cross. And so we turn our attention now in an attitude of worship to this table that commemorates Jesus' death and resurrection. Please pray with me. Lord, thank you that you have given us this gift of your presence, that we don't have to travel anywhere to experience your presence. By your Spirit, Lord, you are here. And because of what Jesus has done, you are here with us. Lord, would you give us a heart to bring our thirst and our heart to worship you into your presence? Amen.